Jesus, Moses, Abraham, and all the biblical prophets, to emphasize on the global peace and the global family of Adam and Eve, that we are all on this earth together, and we have one future, and that is cooperation and helping one another for a better future.
Why civilizations exchange for you?
So after spending in the United States 10 years, I started hearing the concept of clash of civilizations.
Yes.
And I started hearing that those terrorists and those extremists, really, they hate us. They hate American values. They hate Western values. And to me, that's completely not true. And I wanted to share with people in the United States first, and then the people of the world, that we are all on the surface of this earth for thousands and thousands of years, have been enriching one another, helping one another, whether you are from this tribe or this tribe, whether you are from these people and these nations or that nation. And the history testifies to that, that the Muslims, when they went out of Arabia, they really translated into Arabic the works of the Greeks and the works of the Indians, the Chinese, and they passed this Islamic civilization of technology, of medicine, of philosophy, of all of that to Europe. And the European scholars talks about European Renaissance and how they benefited from the Islamic civilization in Cordoba, Spain, Andalusia, Spain, Sicily in Italy, and Baghdad, Damascus, Egypt. Now, in the 21st century, we have to look back and see how we can continue this message of cooperation. We are living in a world where Muslims by themselves cannot rule everything. Christians by themselves cannot rule everything. It's a world of cooperation. It's a world of collaboration between the Indians and the Chinese and the Americans and the Europeans. So today we are witnessing a very disturbing phenomena of racism. That I am better than you because I'm black and you are white, because I'm Christian and you are Muslim, because I'm Hindu and you are Buddhist. This notion of racism, which started to rise now in Europe and in the United States because of the issue of migration and refugees, requires from us to go back to our history and see how we are going to understand one another and collaborate with one another.
Let's look at your move from Damascus to the U.S. Why decide to start your mission at the U.S.?
Because I read always about the Constitution of the United States, that it is a constitution that borrowed from different lawgivers throughout the history, and it was written in such a way that people are welcomed from anywhere around the world. America is a land of immigrants. It's almost 300 years old, that emphasize on the issue of religious freedom, emphasize on the issue of separation of church and state, emphasize on the issues of human dignity and prosperity and pursuit of happiness. I thought in order for me to spread this message, it will be easy to be in the United States. And I thank Almighty for migrating to the United States and becoming a U.S. citizen in 1997. But right now I'm really trying to take this message that I enjoyed in the United States around the world, to emphasize on the global peace and understanding, and to emphasize on the collaboration between one another. The things that I have seen in America, that Muslims have their own presence. Muslims have been in the United States even before Christopher Columbus. Muslims now are part of the society, and the only way forward for us in America and around the world is that kind of understanding that the word of God that was given to all the prophets has been nothing but peace and love and mercy and compassion and collaboration.
What brings you to Kenya?
I was invited by the United States Embassy, and this is my second day. I'm enjoying the culture and the people,
The hospitality.
the wonderful hospitality, and Karibu Sana. That's wherever you go, you hear it.
Yes.
And I always liked Kenya. I work with Kenyan students in the United States who come on the YES program, on the exchange program for high school students. I worked with them since 2003 and 2004 until this day. They come to our international conferences in the United States. Since 2006, I started a global conference. It's called Better Understanding for a Better World. We get students from 68 countries, and Kenya is one of them. I'm really delighted to come and meet with the alumni of these conferences, as well as with the alumni who came through the IVLP programs, International Visitors Leadership Program, or the IOP, the International Observers Programs, that my organization participate in those programs and run the IOP, International Observers.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that Kenya has a lot of things to offer East Africa and the whole continent of Africa and the whole world.
You know, Imam Arafat, there are issues of history that we need to appreciate, even as we have this conversation. Renaissance across the world, European being one of them, have borrowed a lot from the Islamic culture. It has informed civilization of a time. And that was how the situation has been. But now flash forward to the 21st century. There is an attempt to associate Islam with terrorism, Islam with radicalization, Islam with intolerance. In your view, what are the areas of misunderstanding? What gaps exist in understanding Islam as a religion that have led citizens of the world to have this perceived thought of what Islam is all about?
Throughout the history, there has been always demonizing the other who is different. We have seen it even before Islam. People were not happy with Jesus, with Christianity, and the Christianity was persecuted. The Quran spoke about that era, the persecution of the early Christians. We have a chapter in the Quran, by the way, it's called Surah Al-Kahf, the cave, where the story of these 7 or 8 youth who ran away from the persecution of the Romans, and they hid in a cave and they slept, and they ended up sleeping for 309 years, and then God recreated them again. The point is to tell the Muslims that during the time of Prophet Muhammad, look at the early Christians, also they were persecuted. The Jews also were persecuted. So that kind of persecution has been by people demonizing the other who are different. But Muslims, the same way. Sometimes they were successful and sometimes they were persecuted. We are living in a time right now, from my own perspective, there are others who are kind of, they are feeling uncomfortable, unsafe of the growth of the Muslims. We are living in a new era right now where for the first time in the history of Islam, you have millions and millions of people who are Muslims migrating to the West.
Yes.
This never happened before with that number. You have close to 8 million Muslims living in America. You have close to 55 million Muslims living in Europe. That is creating tension today among, other groups who call themselves, other, either Christians or other religions. They are having problems with that. Even throughout the history also, some of the Muslims who call themselves Muslims, they had problems with others interacting and mingling with them. The word of God through the Quran was always to interact with everyone and to understand diversity. Some people today are having problems with diversity in America and in Europe. But diversity to me is the will of God. For a reason, He created you in Kenya, created me in Syria. I ended up in America. Today, if you go to the United States, you will see really people from all over the world living and calling themselves Americans. Somehow, some people today are really trying to work very hard to present that religion of Islam as a religion of terrorism, religion of extremism. And you and I are reading online and seeing all of these groups, whether you call them Al-Shabaab, whether you call them Al-Qaeda or ISIS. And others. We know who is financing them and who is recruiting them and who is, feeding this kind of ideology to them, and how certain elements of the media is focusing only on those and presenting to the whole world as if those people are the representative of Islam. As if whatever they do, 24 hours, the media is broadcasting their heinous crimes over and over and over again. To me, that's really disturbing. Who told you that Al-Shabaab are the representatives of Islam, or ISIS, or Al-Qaeda, or others? Who told you that KKK is the representatives of Christianity? Who told you that those Buddhists in Burma, or who are doing whatever they are doing to the Rohingya and expelling those Muslims, that those are true representatives of Buddhism? So you see what I'm saying? The same thing, we are seeing it in India. Nationalists who are using the religion to advocate their own agenda. So today, it is my responsibility as somebody who studied Islam and studied the Quran, that it is the continuation of the messages of all the prophets and emphasized on its mission of peace and compassion. We have in the Quran, as you know, 114 chapters, and each chapter starts with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Even though chapter 9, that does not have Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, this verse is mentioned in Surah An-Naml. So 114 chapter and 114 in the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, as if Almighty is telling you, before you read this chapter, you have to understand that you have to read it in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful.
Exactly.
Yes, there are verses talking about fighting and killing, but this is like in your constitution, in our constitution, there are elements talking about police, that they are allowed to carry weapons, and also elements about army. I mean, each nation has army and has police.
There has been a misunderstanding, and I'm glad that you brought it up, on the question of conflict and fighting. There are chapters that mention that in the Quran. And you find that these groups, be it ISIS, be it Al-Shabaab, be it Al-Qaeda, they make deliberate reference to those very chapters. How do you intend to counter and correct the perception created through this, by association of these very chapters to these very groups?
As I mentioned, each nation has police and army to protect. But these weapons are meant to secure the peace within the society when it is used properly. There are verses in the Quran talking about fighting, but that fighting to stop the enemy who are intending to do bad for the society and for the peaceful coexistence. Even though those verses that talking about the permission of defending the country, you cannot take it out of context.
Then the context is?
And the context is global peace and mercy and compassion.
Does that come at the expense of anything or anyone?
And that's where you have to read the verses before and after, and you will see that these verses and that kind of using the weapon is really to protect the non-Muslims as well as the Muslims. Not only to protect the Muslims, to protect also those who want to do harm to the churches, those who want to do harms to the synagogues, those who want to do harms to temples and to the mosques. For example, there's a verse in the Quran that says, وَلَوْلَا دَفْعُ اللَّهِ النَّاسَ بَعْضُهُمْ لِبَعْضٍ. If it was not the permission from Almighty for people to stand up and defend each other, otherwise the synagogue, churches, temples, and mosques where the name of God has been mentioned there would have been destroyed. So that's where we have to really let the scholars and the wise people and the intellectuals to be interviewed, and the media to quote them all the time, not to quote al-Zawahiri, not to quote al-Baghdadi, not to quote somebody from Boko Haram who is taking 200 girls, and what are you doing? So unfortunately, we are letting the media to define us through the works of the criminals and the works of those who are used by other agencies or other countries or other groups to present you and me as extremists, as killers, as people who are anti-peace and peaceful coexistence.
Global reportage on issues touching on security or the lack of it, Islam-Christian relations across the world. Do you feel they've been fair, or do you feel the reportage has been fair enough to all groups?
It is the responsibility of the people who believe in interfaith to amplify their work through the media, because I don't think it is fair to let the media sometimes select those groups and present them as the representatives of our religions. For example, today some people, whenever they hear the word Allahu Akbar, they associate the word Allahu Akbar with killing and stabbing and blowing up certain things or shooting. While, for example, the word Allahu Akbar means God is greater than anything, and it means that no matter how big your sin is, God's forgiveness and God's compassion is bigger than that. That you have to work for these big missions of uniting people of different cultures and different religions for peace and prosperity, and to work together for security. And no matter how you think this is big, God's help is bigger than what you think. And you cannot do it only by yourself, but also through the help of God and the help of those whom were sent to you by God to help you, whether they are Christians or Jews or people of other faith and other traditions. So that's where, unfortunately, today we are seeing a lot of misunderstanding and misperception. And that's why our conferences are really meant to bring people from different cultures and different religions together to constantly talk about issues that concerning the local and the global issues.
In your opinion, why the affinity for Islam, as far as these terror groups are concerned? Why do they choose Islam as opposed to any other religion?
You mean?
For example, when you look at Al-Shabaab, let me take an example of Al-Shabaab. When you look at the whole thing of radicalization, they would take maybe a local, radicalize them, and in the process of radicalizing them, they give them a name that will associate them with the Islam faith. So why the affinity for Islam?
Again, from what I have read and I have seen and observed, some people are really trying to associate whatever they are doing with Islam. They do something, and then they have a flag behind them to show the word either Islam or Allahu Akbar.
Exactly.
They do an interview, and they have a Kalashnikov or certain kind of weapons behind them. This is really a trouble for Muslims around the world. You have 1.7 billion Muslims
Exactly.
who believe in the first word in the Quran as Iqra, read. I'm having trouble with those groups who always, whenever they want to talk, they will associate their words or their actions all with weapons. I wonder why they don't have books behind them, why they don't stand in front of libraries that shows true message of Islam. Those people are enemies for us before they are enemies for others. They are showing my religion that has affinity to knowledge. And Iqra, the first word revealed in the Quran, not kill or fight, but the first word was Iqra, read and seek knowledge, because through knowledge you are going to prosper. I wonder why all of these terror groups, by the way, in Asia or Africa or Europe or the Middle East, they don't emphasize on the word Iqra, read, but they always show you weapons and they are fighting. As if the only way to resolve issues is with weapons and with fighting. I know that there are lingering issues from colonialist era. I know that there are problems in the Middle East, goes back to dictatorship, goes back to
historical injustices,
historic and social injustice, and global interests of other big powers who are using those groups against those groups. I mean, take Syria, for example, who has been suffering from 7 years civil war and this conflict. You could see the international interests groups also are using this conflict. Before, we have seen it in Lebanon, who suffered almost 15 years of civil war. You will see these proxy wars and proxy groups fighting one another. But I would like just to go back and respond to those who are using violence and using weapons just to show that they want to advance the cause of Islam through fighting. Where is Iqra? Where is read? Where is study? That is all over the Quran. So many verses end with لَعَلَّهُمْ يَعْقِلُونَ. Maybe they will have intellect. Maybe they will study. لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Maybe they will think. Maybe they will study. So through studying, through reading, through advancement of knowledge and technology, these kind of things that brought Islamic civilization to the world stage. If it was not for the Arabs and the Muslims who brought algebra, who brought mathematics to the West, and even these numbers that we are using today, if you open the encyclopedia, you will see these Arabic numerals, the 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
The Romans, it's I, for 2, I for 3. So we are relying on one another, on other contribution of other civilizations.
When you look back at your country of origin, Syria, you're from Damascus, right? What's your take? What do you think of the situation there? I know right now you're an American citizen, but when you look back at what's happening in Syria, what kind of emotions does that invoke in you, Imam?
It's really so sad to see that this country that has been always named as the cradle of civilization, and this country that has been always a country of coexistence among different religions and different ethnic groups, reaching that level. I would, of course, blame those who used violence. There has been always issues, with the regime, but allowing us to use violence, violence begets violence, and then, of course, we are living in an area that is surrounded by a lot of interesting countries and interesting conflicts. You have the Palestinian Israelis, you have before us also the war in Iraq. So unfortunately, the people, I think, especially those who were misled by the word jihad and let's go and use arms and fight. Before you fight, you have to, understand who is funding you and who is supporting you and why. I think the whole Middle East, not only Syria, but also other countries who suffered from the quote-unquote the Arab Spring, I think they did not understand and read the global situation.
Yeah.
They did not read the global interests, and they allowed regional powers to fund them with weapons and money, and then at the end they used them. And this is a problem today I'm seeing with a lot of imams who are very good in fiqh or jurisprudence and Islamic law, but they are not also understanding the global system and the global culture, and to realize what's your position on the surface of this earth. I hope that after this war in Syria, that those Syrians who left and they ended up in Europe, ended up in America, ended up in different countries, and they became refugees. I hope that their children are going to bring back a different perspective, not only for Syria, only for peace and prosperity, but also for the entire Middle East.
What is jihad?
The word jihad is one of the words that's really misunderstood today by a lot of non-Muslims. And again, these groups, Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Boko Haram, whenever they raise the word jihad, are contributing to that kind of misunderstanding. The word jihad in the Quran has completely different meanings than what the people today associate this word with, and that is only military struggle. The word jihad in Arabic is from the roots juhud, and juhud is efforts. So any kind of efforts you exert toward anything, that's a form of jihad. So sometimes in America we have, the people would say, we are going to have a crusade against cancer, a crusade against this disease or that issue. There are people who their jihad is really to gain knowledge. That is your jihad. Your jihad is to help counter malaria and get rid of this disease or cholera or whatever. So it does not mean only fight.
Does it involve, though, fighting, warfare?
And that's one of the meanings, because we have something called jihadun nafs, when you have a jihad against your own ego to contain yourself from doing something that is bad for you and bad for others. So that's jihadun nafs. And also, so any kind of struggle, any kind of efforts, that's called juhud and jihad. So people who are going to have high degrees in their university, at the school, at work, that's kind of jihad also. But to limit the word jihad only to fighting, that's one of the misunderstanding also about this word and about Islam itself.
There's also been a feeling, or as you said, the misrepresentation of the religion. There are those who paint the term non-believer to refer to non-Muslims. Is that the case?
We have to be extremely careful when we speak about others.
Yes.
The Quran spoke about those who are Christians and Jews, for example, call them Ahlul Kitab, the people of the book. People of the book have been mentioned in the Quran in such a way with great respect.
Yes.
And also the people who are not people of the book, for example, they go under the word humanity when the Quran always say, Ya ayyuhan nas, O mankind. Sometimes also the Quran used the word Bani Adam, the sons of Adam and Eve. Those people could be affiliated with a religion or with no religion.
Yep.
So we really have to emphasize on these terms that connect between me and you, connect between me and the people in China, connect between me and the people in the United States and Europe. So that kind of those kind of terms we have to be very careful. We can say the Muslims and people of other faith traditions.
Yep. Okay.
In order not to say some kind of words hurt other people's feelings.
Absolutely. And fuel unwarranted conflict, which is not very healthy. Thank you so much, Imam Mohamad Bashar Arafat. It's been a pleasure hosting you.
Thank you.
And at the end of the day, what we should all take home from this conversation is that civilizations exchange and cooperation amongst citizens of the world is very, very crucial. It is indeed a global village and no man is an island. Therefore, we need to coexist. We need to understand each other and most especially embrace each other as we move forward to improving the quality of life for each and everyone living on this earth.